much has fantasy football changed over the last year? We are going to find out. We are going to do a 2025 Underdog Fantasy Draft, promo code Davis, using 2024 closing ADP. We're going to try and not mess up the room too much, but we're using that as our heuristic. Let's see how much things have changed year over year.
It's Short King Summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's Short King Summer.
All right, we are drafting out of the 8 slot. In this draft, we take a look at average draft position from last year. It actually means there's going to be a decent number of guys that we are available to select. A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, who was a 1-2 turn pick, Jahmyr Gibbs. Purpose of this exercise, very simple. We are going to skew as close as we can to prior year average draft position at each pick. We're going to try and not break the room. We don't want this underdog fantasy draft to get thrown out, but we are going to do our best to replicate what last year's rankings, what the market was telling us last year, and we're going to see how much of things really changed. And I think you could see right away here, big difference. Chase, Jefferson, the first and second overall picks, so we're not going to have the ability to select them there. I suppose if we are going to follow the rules of this exercise, it does mean that we need to select A.J. Brown over Puka Nacua. I am fine to do that. I don't think it is breaking very many of the rules. I think that it is basically doing exactly what this exercise says. What are we hoping to learn from this exercise? A couple things. The first thing that I want to sort of organize in my mind is how much has the structure changed? Are wide receivers going that much earlier? Are running backs going that much earlier? And then also, obviously we have the rookie influx, Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter. We're not going to have any rookies on this team if we can help it. And by and large, I think that we are going to see a lot of guys are more similar than you would think, but then the differences are massive, right? The breakout guys year over year, Brian Thomas Jr., a great example of that. And I think a great example that we have here at the 1-2 turn, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the highest ranked player there that we have available to select. If I wanted to lie about the exercise a little bit, we could take Jonathan Taylor, but I think it is more instructive in this exercise to select the highest ADP player from last season. So that is what we're going to do. We are going to select Marvin Harrison. So we have A.J. Brown and Marvin Harrison, which would have been a very common team to start your draft with last year. Let's see how this exercise progresses. All right, we are about up with our 3rd round pick here. Plenty of names, actually, again, more than you would think looking at the board. We still have Kyren Williams available. Some of the funny names are, Brandon Ayuk way down, but Kyren Williams is still right about there. Mike Evans, Devonta Smith still there. DJ Moore right about there. Pacheco, obviously a faller. Rashee Rice, also one of the guys who has gained a little bit and then lost a little bit. I think that probably the closest way to Hugh to what would have happened last year would be to select Mike Evans. Now, this puts us in, I suppose, from a team construction perspective in a little bit of a weird place. It probably would have been a little bit better to take Kyren Williams, and maybe I should have just done it, but these guys were effectively going back-to-back, Kyren Williams and Mike Evans, Devonta Smith available. But yeah, kind of the more things change, the more they stay the same. We have Josh Allen right here as well. Jalen Hurts is kind of hovering in this range. Josh Jacobs is more expensive by about 20 picks. You do notice the fallers are a little bit more conspicuous than the risers. Michael Pittman Jr., T. Higgins. How about a huge faller there for Travis Kelce? We have A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Mike Evans, Mike Evans. Select. I guess actually we could take a Breece Hall or Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams goes right there for Breece, a first-round pick from last year, right? Breece Hall, 4.5 on average. I mean, what an absolute bargain we have there with one Mr. Breece Hall. So we now have Breece, a first-rounder from last year, A.J. Brown, a first-rounder from last year, Marvin Harrison, a first-rounder from last year, and Mike Evans on the team. Also, do just want to give a shout-out to Mr. Goodcat, who gave me the idea to do this video. He said, do a draft using last year's ADP. If you guys have any ideas, of course, you can comment down below. on those ideas. You can let me know if there's anything you in particular would like to see, and maybe your thought experiment will end up in the next draft. Sitting here at round 5, there are a couple guys who are basically going the exact same spot they were last year. Ken Walker, 53.2, his closing ADP last year. Calvin Ridley, very similar spot. Joe Mixon in the 5th round this year was the first pick in the 6th round last season. Jaden Reed, a faller. Rome Odunze, almost exactly the same pick that he was last year. So I think that we are going to go with Rome Odunze. Again, just an example of how similar things can go. And obviously, you know, over the course of the summer, guys are going to have varying amounts of ADP, but Rome Odunze's closing ADP last season was 62.5. We selected him at pick 56, but with an ADP of 63.3. Coming up for our next pick, it's maybe going to get a little bit more tricky because we've got some real fallers here, guys who have totally gone off the map. You know, Rashad White, Christian Kirk, Jaden Reed, Anthony Richardson. How about a guy who barely gets drafted? Brian Thomas Jr., one of the biggest winners. Huge faller. Keenan Allen, a guy who basically doesn't exist anymore. In Deontay Johnson. A very interesting thought experiment here. From a structural perspective on this given team, it probably would make sense to take a running back. I suppose maybe I could bend the rules a little bit here. James Conner's ADP last season, 72.8. It would be a little bit early. This is basically the same spot that Godwin got selected last year. I'm going to break the rules a little bit, and I'm going to take James Conner because I think it's very funny that he scored 230.8 fantasy points last season at a very similar average draft position, 72.8 last year. This year I just took him at pick 65, but his ADP is 67.9. That a 29-year-old running back could score that many points, and the market still says, you know what, man, we don't really care that much. I think quarterback might get a little bit tricky in this draft, but we're going to find. I think one of the things that you would expect going through is that as it gets deeper down the board, you're going to have a wider range of where guys go because the market was less certain about Jackson Smith and Jigba, Keon Coleman, Najee Harris, Ladd McConkey, Aaron Jones, all these guys. Although it is funny that Aaron Jones, again, basically goes in the same exact range that he did last year. This pick, I think we can afford DeAndre Swift. Let me check Tony Pollard. Is Tony Pollard an acceptable selection? Last year, Pollard was 95. For the purpose of this exercise, Swift is more intellectually honest. 81.6 for DeAndre Swift's ADP last season. DeAndre Swift, 87.9 for his average draft position last season. Again, the more things change, the more they stay the same. For our next selection, as we have already drafted, Breece Hall, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Mike Evans, and Rome Odunze. Baker Mayfield was cheaper last year. Caleb Williams, a very similar average draft position to where he went last season. Let's go ahead and check Kyler Murray in last year's ADP, 70.1. So I think this next selection, again, to remain honest, I think Kyler Murray, this would have been a screaming value for Kyler Murray last season. We can also take a look and see where Caleb Williams was going. Caleb Williams, 105.2 last season, 99.8 after scoring 260 points. So actually a little bit worse than even a guy like Patrick Mahomes last season. If we're going off last year's ADP, if the thing that I was saying, the purpose of this exercise, drafting the highest ranked guy from last year, it has to be Kyler Murray. It gives us a stack, so it's going to add us in Kyler Murray with Marvin Harrison Jr., and it also gets last year's top 6 round quarterback in there, so a top 60 pick in Kyler. DeAndre Swift, very similar to where he was going last year. Evans, the same as where he was going last year. Rome Odunze, the same, but then, basically, we're the only guy we paid a terrible price on relatively is Marvin Harrison Jr. All the rest of those guys are pretty similar pricing, which again does kind of make you think. We're starting to get into some very funny disparities. Last year's 9th round includes such luminaries as Josh Palmer, Romeo Doubs, Zach Moss, Brian Robinson Jr., Curtis Samuel is a 9th round pick, very funny. Jonathan Brooks as a 9th round pick, very funny. I suppose for this exercise, well, we are going to be taking Caleb Williams. Spoiler alert there. I think that is, again, just the most intellectually rigorous way to do this exercise. Njoku, I suppose, because we do not have a tight end yet, we are going to select Caleb Williams on this team, adding into stack a team you would have been happy to stack last year with Roma Dunze. Getting into round 10, basically some of the worst picks on the board last year. Devin Singletary, Jerome Ford, Tajay Spears, Sontavian Wicks, Brock Purdy, a huge win. Rico Dowdle, a huge win. Shaheed should have been a win, but got injured. Blake Corum, one of the worst picks on the board. Trevor Lawrence, and A.D. Mitchell. Wow. So here in round 10, I mean, we're really looking at a spot where we either need to start reaching. Jordan Mason, undrafted last season. Mark Andrews, actually, is the answer here. Mark Andrews last season was going at 51.6. So we are getting a big value on him. I believe, if I remember correctly, Evan Ingram at 75.2. So he would also be a potential selection there. I mean, how funny is that? Remember Evan Ingram, 75.2 before that season that he had for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we're going to get our tight end here. I suppose Shaheed at 113.3. Last season, he went at 114.9. So think of everything that happened to Rashid Shaheed. The huge breakout. The Saints on September 22nd were 4th in the NFC in Super Bowl odds. Everyone thought Clint Kubiak was going to be, the next head coach. And he round-tripped it all the way back to 113.3. That is legitimately hilarious to me. We are going to take Mark Andrews because he was a 5th round pick at that 4 or 5 turn last year. So huge value from 2024 to 2025 for us here. Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Breece Hall, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Mike Evans, Roma Dunze, and Mark Andrews. We are absolutely cooking our 2024 best ball draft. All right, we're back up and consulting, the oracle of 2024 ADP. I mean, look, are you want to take any of these guys? Tyler Lockett? I don't think so. I mean, just looking at the Q and ADP here, David Njoku is definitely the highest drafted. Well, actually, you know what? I totally take that back. It is one Mr. Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown last season, I mean, my God, he was a 5th round pick for a huge portion of the pool and then closed at 82.7. It's clearly Hollywood Brown here. One, it fits our team. We would be happy. I think we would be happy to take David Njoku on this team, but we already have our 2 quarterbacks. We were a little bit weak at wide receiver. Marvin Harrison, who was a huge loss last year. Mike Evans was a huge win. Roma Dunze was a loss. Hollywood Brown, one of the worst picks on the board after he broke that collarbone. Mark Andrews, a huge win. Again, I mean, just look at this range we are at in round 11. Look at all these. Lockett, huge L. Edwards, huge L. Tua, L. Myers, win. Goff, win. Eckler, L. Judy, win. Polk, one of the biggest L's on the board. Gabe Davis, huge L. Mike Williams, a pick that never made sense. Trey Benson, huge L. Dalton Schultz, huge L. Nick Chubb, huge L. Brandon Cooks. I mean, my God, guys, maybe we are not as good at this game as we think. It's certainly possible that we are not as good at this game as we think. Looking here at the ADP grouping, I mean, Herbert would be a pick. Stroud would be a pick. I believe, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dallas Goedert has to be one of the highest rated guys left on this sheet. A 10th round pick last year, a 10th round pick, actually later than a 10th round pick this year. We are going to select Dallas Goedert as our second tight end at pick 137 in round 12. So again, just accruing that 2024 value, but it truly is stunning. I mean, look at the disparity. If you were a Chuba Hubbard guy last year, huge win. If you were a Ty Chandler guy last year, basically no one was worse than you. If you were a Jalen Wright guy, you suck. If you were a Zach Charbonnet guy, guess what? You got some wins. And that is how fickle fantasy football can be, because at the time, those decisions were perfectly justified. But let's continue this 2024 best ball draft in 2025. Up on the clock here, and we are again in a sort of interesting spot. Guerrero last season ended up being a win. if I remember correctly, Ray Davis, 154.8 for Ray Davis last year, 146.8 for Ray Davis this year. Feels like that is probably who we should take. He's at the top of ADP now. He made sense from last year's. And again, just very funny to see Josh Downs as a win. And then some of the biggest losses, Jaleel McLaughlin, a guy who got 150 touches and couldn't do anything. Luke Musgrave next to Adam Thielen, who went on a crazy run as a top 12 wide receiver. And then how about this? How about Bucky Irving, a second-round pick now, 157.7, right next to Demario Douglas, Deshaun Watson, Jalen Tolbert. I mean, what a funny game that we play. So after taking Ray Davis, we then need to be thinking positionally, it basically doesn't matter. Lee Gett, who is available here at pick 158.9, would have been a pretty decent CLV pick for us last year. He was 151, a 13th round pick. I think if I was truly to take ADP year over year, had I just overlaid last year's average draft position into rankings, I have a feeling that Jaleel McLaughlin would actually be one of the highest ones. I will mark him down in our queue here so that I remember to select him. I think for the sake of making this team, me not just flushing money down the toilet on underdogfantasy.com, I think that we are going to select Lee Gett, who I have like a little bit of hope for, just as I had a little bit of hope for him last year. Maybe should I double check and make sure Jalen McMillan went later than Lee Gett last year. So we are going to continue to do that. And I suppose our final round picks should all be guys who are basically the dustiest dust balls from last season. So we will select Xavier Lee Gett, a first round pick in 2024 in the NFL draft, and then ended up kind of being a 12-13 style pick in Best Ball Mania on Underdog. Plenty of ways we can go here with this pick, as we are about to pick at 176. Last year, exactly at 176, Greg Dortch, my boy. Wan'Dale Robinson, 177. Kamani Vidal. You guys remember Kamani Vidal? I barely do. Marshawn Lloyd, 167. Khalil Herbert, funnily enough, Khalil Herbert at 165. I'm going to do what I said I'd do. On the 10, I'm using last year's average draft position to draft my team. So I take Denver running back Jaleel McLaughlin. Many people in the fantasy football community last year said, you know what you should do? You should always take a Denver Broncos running back. Sean Payton backfields. Every year that Sean Payton has called plays for an NFL team, they've been top 5 in expected fantasy points to running backs. Pretty good logic, right? And Jaleel was very involved. He generated 137 touches. Certainly not nothing for a 13th round pick, a 13th round pick. Second on the team in rushes, Javonte Williams was ineffective. If I would have told you that Javonte Williams was ineffective in 2024, that he averaged 3.7 yards per carry, and that Jaleel was the best runner on the team in terms of success rate, you would have been like, oh my gosh, my Jaleel bags are packed. And boy, would you have been wrong. For our next selection, we do need to think about wide receiver. Pretty clear the pick that we are going to do here. Keenan Allen, last season, 68.7. One pick in ADP behind Brian Thomas Jr. I don't like him as a pick in 2025, but that's not the point. The point is that is the knife's edge, the razor's edge that all the guys you take over the age of 30, 31 in fantasy football are on. Your black marble season, even if you play well for a huge stretch of the season, which Keenan Allen did, can still be that close. So Keenan Allen, I pick 180. Closing out here, I mean, there are just a plethora of old dudes that we could be taking, but I'll tell you the funniest one that we could do here. He's already been picked, which is a little bit of a bummer, but Anthony Richardson being available this late in the draft would be very good. I think J.K. Dobbins would make a pretty good pick. I think Marshawn Lloyd would make a pretty good pick. Let's just go see who was going at exactly pick 200 last year. Of course, it's Daniel Jones. Why wouldn't it be Daniel Jones? I think for the purposes of this exercise, why don't we go ahead and take Marshawn Lloyd? Again, another good example of how things happen entirely outside of our control for maybe good picks in fantasy football, right? The Green Bay Packers were just as run heavy as we thought they would be. As a team, They were second in the NFL in pass rate under expectation. Only the Indianapolis Colts were more run-heavy than the Green Bay Packers as a team. They ran 526 times, 526 team rushes. That is with 103 rushes to Emmanuel Wilson, 36 to Chris Brooks, 55 if you put their quarterbacks together. There was meat on the bone for Marshawn Lloyd, but he got hurt. He got appendicitis, of all things, appendicitis for an NFL running back. Not particularly a good outcome there. Let's see, pick 209. It's pretty good. Pick 209 exactly last season was Theo Johnson. He might be exactly pick 209 this year. Theo Johnson, 212. So exactly pick 209 this season is more dusty tight ends, Terrace Ferguson and Juwan Johnson. I mean, obviously, why wouldn't it be? I think positionally, we need to do a wide receiver. De'Ami Brown at 209.9. I think this is going to work out pretty serendipitously because De'Ami Brown last year was 208.6. So we are going to select De'Ami Brown. So our 2024 fantasy team following last year's board, we selected A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Mike Evans, and Breece Hall. How stoked would you have been to get Breece Hall with Marvin Harrison on one of your fantasy teams last year? You would have been doing cartwheels. You would have been sending screenshots saying, dude, look at my unique combinatorial pairing I got in the Mini Schnauzer 17. Roma Dunze, round 5. James Conner, round 6. DeAndre Swift, round 7. This would have happened last year. Kyler Murray, pick 89, could have easily happened last season. Caleb Williams, 104, could have easily happened in 2024. Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, Dallas Goedert, Ray Davis, Xavier Legette, Jaleel McLaughlin, Keenan Allen, Marshawn Lloyd, and De'Ami Brown. My friends, that is a real 2024 looking fantasy football team. What did we learn? The more things change, the more they stay the same. The black marble season for older players is always closer than you think. Running back situations are very noisy, and things that we think we know for certain, we absolutely do not. And injuries that never happen end up being kind of the untold story of the season. Josh Jacobs gets injured. Marshawn Lloyd doesn't get injured. We're looking at an entirely different ADP layout, probably for the entire team. So as always, I think it's a little bit instructive to look back before we look forward. Everyone, please make sure like this video, subscribe to the channel for daily fantasy football videos. Consider checking out patreon.com/DavisMattek. Link to that in the description below for more fantasy football content. And if you are not in these games on Underdog Fantasy, use promo code Davis for a first-time deposit bonus match and a free Pick'em Square. I'll see you guys soon.
It's Short King Summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's Short